This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans. It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Whether you call them stables, factions, or families, groups of wrestlers, usually heels, but not always, have been an important part of wrestling. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at 4 fantastic 80s wrestling factions Part 1. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. The criteria. Just what is a faction? Wrestling's Greatest Moments defines a faction as any group of 3 or more wrestlers, not counting a manager. Now, pro wrestling has had many factions, not only in the 1980s, but we'll focus on the 80s factions for now. And don't worry if your favorite faction isn't listed, as more videos are coming. The Rat Pack. One of Mid-South Wrestling's most interesting factions was the Rat Pack. Comprised of Ted DiBiase, Jim Duggan, and Matt Bourne, this heel trio ran roughshod over the area's babyfaces. All 3 wrestlers were heat magnets, particularly DiBiase, who had turned heel by using a loaded glove to defeat his friend, the Junkyard Dog, for the North American Heavyweight Championship. Mid-South's promoter Bill Watts brought Jim Duggan in to help DiBiase, a move Duggan credits was taking his career to the next level. In his memoir, Hacksaw, the Jim Duggan Story, Hacksaw recalls working with DiBiase. Ted DiBiase was on fire as a heel at that time, and he and I combined as the Rat Pack, maybe the most hated team in the area since the Freebirds had set the territory on fire in 1980, with the feud against Mid-South's top hero, the Junkyard Dog. As mentioned, a faction requires at least 3 wrestlers, so let's look at how Matt Bourne joined the mix. One of the Rat Pack's most infamous angles involved Ted DiBiase and Jim Duggan's quest to win the Mid-South Tag Team Championship. DiBiase was the North American champion, and Duggan was the Louisiana champion when they challenged the Junkyard Dog and Mr. Olympia for the titles. Past matches had ended in disqualifications, so a no disqualification bout was booked with the titles, with the wrestler taking the fall, having to leave the area for 90 days. Things got heated when DiBiase announced Duggan was unavailable. That didn't slow DiBiase down, as he brought in outsider Matt Bourne to team up with him, believing DiBiase would throw Bourne under the bus if things went wrong and let the outsider take the fall and leave a promotion he wasn't even a part of. Now, things didn't go well for the heels as the champions dominated, with the JYD even relieving DiBiase of his controversial glove. During the match, a person in a gorilla suit, a mascot from the state fair, had been handing out balloons to the kids in the audience. Suddenly, the mascot went bananas. In an article on the Rat Pack at Kayfabe Memories, Scott Williams writes, "The State Fair gorilla jumped onto the apron and tore off his mask to reveal Jim Duggan. Duggan speared JYD. DiBiase got his object back and nailed the dog with a once more loaded glove. He got the pin, and the crowd went silent, stunned by the outcome. DiBiase and Bourne won the tag titles, and Bourne joined the group. The Junkyard Dog was sent packing as the Rat Pack rejoiced in their triumph. However, their glory was short-lived as a not-so-mysterious masked man named Stagger Lee showed up to avenge the injustices heaped upon the JYD. Promoter Bill Watts knew the terrible trio was a right mix to draw fans. Unfortunately, kayfabe still was strong, which meant trouble, particularly for DiBiase, who recalls the heat he faced getting to shows, and the former wrestler-turned-matchmaker Grizzly Smith paid for helping DiBiase. I told Grizzly Smith that there was no way I was going to drive my own car to the arena. I knew the fans would destroy it. Grizzly agreed and drove me to the show. Unfortunately for Grizzly, on the first night, the fans punctured all 4 of his tires because he'd brought me to the show. The Rat Pack eventually dissolved when Bourne left Mid-South and Duggan turned babyface after Ted DiBiase aligned himself with Skandar Akbar, a foreign heel whose anti-American sentiments disgusted Duggan. The First Family. While many fans remember Jimmy Mouth of the South Hart's runs at the WWF and WCW, longtime fans know his career began in Memphis's Continental Wrestling Association, or the CWA, where he formed his first family of wrestling. The group of heels were a constant menace for the area's babyfaces, but Hart focused his attention on the area's top babyface, Jerry the King Lawler. Ironically, Lawler had been a member of the First Family until he broke his leg in a touch football game, missing nearly a year from wrestling due to complications with the healing process. Promoter Jerry Jarrett was incensed about the injury, and this turned into an angle that would have incredible benefits down the road. In his memoir, It's Good to Be the King, sometimes, Jerry Lawler writes, Jerry Jarrett was really upset with me for risking injury playing football, and our relationship went sour for a while. The next week, he had Jimmy Hart go on TV and say, "What do you do with a racehorse that breaks its leg? Shoot him." There was a muscled-up guy named Paul Ellering, and he took my crown and put it on his head, saying, "This is the new king." Lawler returned, reportedly to the delight of Jarrett, as Memphis crowds had thinned since the king's departure, and he had a go-to feud with Jimmy Hart. While the king had many timeless feuds in Memphis against foes such as superstar Bill Dundee, Austin Idol, and Dutch Mantell, to name a few, Hart was always in the mix. The fans ate up the various programs involving Hart, and it benefited Jimmy's wrestlers. The heat would transfer to any wrestler Jimmy Hart brought in. He developed this team called the First Family, which had Randy Savage and Rick Rude and Eddie Gilbert, Lanny Poffo, Kamala, and King Kong Bundy. The idea was that he was trying to find someone to get rid of me. I wasn't mad at Jimmy at all, but we had a long run with that angle. The First Family had many wrestlers come and go, and while Lawler was on top of Jimmy's hit list, the group fought many other babyfaces. Jimmy was CWA's #1 manager, and as such, he led many of his clients to championship gold. Acts including the Bruise Brothers, Porkchop Cash, and the Dream Machine Troy Graham, and the team of King Kong Bundy and Rick Rude won the AWA Southern Tag Team Championship. Hart's many accomplishments are detailed in the online article, Jimmy Hart and the First Family, 3 Decades of Dominance. Hart guided 3 men to runs as the AWA International Heavyweight Champion, CWA's top singles title, Tommy Rich twice, Eddie Gilbert once, and Austin Idol 4 times, and guided 3 men to reigns as the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight title, Randy Savage 3 times, Tommy Rich once, and Bobby Eaton an astounding 10 times. There were many other championships, as Jimmy guided wrestlers to the AWA Southern Heavyweight Championship, another top CWA singles title, with Tommy Rich 5 times, Austin Idol 3 times, and solo runs for King Kong Bundy and Rick Rude. Titles changed hands frequently in the promotion, but Hart reportedly helped his men win titles 35 times, which was quite the feat, despite the dubious means often employed to secure the championships. Jimmy Hart would revive the First Family in World Championship Wrestling in the 90s, and of course, form his stable, the Hart Foundation, when he jumped to the WWF in 1985. The Bobby Heenan Family. The Bobby Heenan family was one of wrestling's most enduring factions, as manager Bobby the Brain Heenan guided many wrestlers in the 1970s and 1980s to championship gold. The Brain, or the Weasel, depending on who you ask, worked in the AWA and WWF with enormous success. The manager, originally dubbed Pretty Boy Bobby Heenan, also managed clients in Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1979. Heenan was a top manager in the AWA in the 70s and 80s. Heenan's managerial acumen led to titles for his men, including the AWA World Tag Team Championship for Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens, as well as Bobby Duncombe and Blackjack Lanza. Heenan helped Nick Bockwinkel make the jump from Tag Team Champion to AWA World Heavyweight Champion. Heenan's fortunes continued in the WWF when he debuted in 1984. As noted in our video, Madison Square Garden Magic, Brain vs. Braun, Heenan vs. Hogan. Bobby's first WWF client was supposed to be Jesse the Body Ventura. However, health problems sidelined Ventura, and he was replaced with Big John Studd. Studd was then paired with Olympic strongman Ken Patera, which led to the infamous haircut match, where Heenan directed his men to take out Andre the Giant and cut his hair. Heenan proved a constant foe for WWF champion Hulk Hogan, bringing in whichever wrestlers he could to dethrone Hogan and destroy Hulkamania. This led to unforgettable storylines where Heenan pitted wrestlers such as King Kong Bundy and Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff against Hogan. Heenan's biggest coup was when he convinced Andre the Giant that Hulk Hogan was dodging him, leading to the Hogan vs. Andre match at WrestleMania 3. Incredibly, Heenan's clients didn't win gold until Ravishing Rick Rude defeated the Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental Championship. Things began to take off from there, with Heenan guiding the Brainbusters, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and later, the Colossal Connection, Andre the Giant and Haku to the WWF Tag Team Championship, Mr. Perfect to the Intercontinental Championship, naturally because he was the perfect manager, and later advising Nature Boy Ric Flair to the WWF Championship. Bobby Heenan managed many other superstars, including the Islanders, Hercules, Adrian Adonis, the Missing Link, the Barbarian, Mr. Perfect, and the Red Rooster. Given Heenan's obnoxious personality, wrestlers occasionally tired of him, leading to one acrimonious split after another, usually leading to new storylines. Disgruntled ex-clients who clashed with Heenan included Paul Orndorff, Hercules, Ken Patera, John Studd, the Red Rooster, and Andre the Giant. If fans were lucky, they'd get to see Heenan step into the ring in weasel suit matches, where the loser had to wear the suit, with Heenan always coming up short. The Legion of Doom. The Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, and manager Precious Paul Ellering will forever be associated with each other from their debut in Georgia Championship Wrestling to their run in the WWF. However, not everyone knows that the Legion of Doom, the name the WWF gave them when they debuted in the promotion in 1990, was also a faction in the early 80s in Georgia Championship Wrestling. This faction is particularly interesting, as no one seems to know who was a member other than the Road Warriors. To this day, fans' fuzzy memories recall a surprising number of official members, associates, and candidates for membership. In 1983, the wrestling landscape was forever changed when the Road Warriors debuted in Georgia Championship Wrestling, arriving with all the subtlety of a natural disaster. Hawk and Animal quickly captured the National Tag Team Championship, dominating any team that stepped into the ring with them. Wrestler Precious Paul Ellering managed them, and while the Road Warriors were already a lucrative act, Ellering also managed the Twin Terrors behind the scenes. He formed a new faction titled the Legion of Doom. The Legion of Doom was notable in that it featured a diverse group of wrestling styles amongst its members. Depending on who you ask, the group included the Road Warriors, as well as Jake the Snake Roberts, Buzz Sawyer, King Kong Bundy, and the Spoiler. However, there appears to be some confusion about who was an official member. Part of this may be due to who Paul Ellering managed before the Road Warriors, and whether this time crossed over into his time managing the group dubbed the Legion of Doom. For example, Kayfabe Commentary's Fred Avery Jr. notes, "The LOD was a collection of some of the biggest names in GCW, Jake Roberts, the Warriors, the Iron Sheik, and even King Kong Bundy for a minute or so." A good example of the confusion over the group's members is King Kong Bundy. Bundy is often mentioned as a member. However, watching the events of his heel turn in Georgia shows he was an associate of the group. Bundy's presence with Ellering fueled speculation the big man might join the group. During an episode of World Championship Wrestling, Gordon Soley asked Precious Paul if Bundy was joining the faction. Ellering, apparently unaware his comments were airing live, dismissed Bundy as a viable candidate, mocking him as 450 pounds of jello and telling Soley the group couldn't afford to feed King Kong. Instead, the group was merely using him. Unfortunately for Ellering, Bundy heard the comments and threw Ellering into the ring for a thrashing. The Road Warriors ran in to save Ellering, leading to a wild feud involving Bundy teaming with the masked superstar to battle Hawk and Animal. The two defeated the champions, a rarity at the time. Wrestling's Greatest Moments will continue investigating the group's official and/or unofficial membership for a future video. What were your favorite 80s wrestling factions? Are there any factions you'd like to see us cover in depth? Share your thoughts in the comments section, and let us know if there are any videos you'd like Wrestling's Greatest Moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about Wrestling's Greatest Moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.